LSU and Auburn. If I were to ask you right now, over the next 5 years, I'm going to give you stock, but you can only put it in one of those programs. Is LSU or is Auburn going to be where you put your money? I think we could make an argument for both. I am very much throwing this out there in an open-ended fashion. I'm really interested in what you guys have to say because I don't necessarily know where I'm falling on this quite yet. But I'm making two assumptions as we get into this. Assumption number one, I think this one's pretty safe. Even the most ardent of Alabama haters will have to agree that for the time being, Alabama's the alpha dog in the SEC West. So I don't think they're going anywhere. Now here's the assumption you could argue with, but I'm telling you this is how I feel. I think Texas A&M is there to stay. So I think they're going to be near the top. They're going to be in the conversation for the number 2 or number 3 spot at the very worst in the SEC West for several years to come. Okay, so what I'm telling you is there are 4 programs. This is why this is the most unique and cutthroat division in college football. There are 4 programs in the SEC West where the expectation is A level. There are not enough wins to go around in the SEC West in any year or over a period of years for all 4 programs to be meeting or exceeding the expectation level. The math doesn't add up. And so Auburn, LSU, Texas A&M, Alabama, all of them pay top dollar. All of them are fully invested. Everyone's all in. They want top dollar results. They want A-plus results. You can't get them. And so that's why I think the LSU-Auburn comparison is so important right now. If you're making the assumption I'm making, which is Bama and A&M are going to be there, we may only have one more seat at the table. This isn't even the first time I've broached this topic of conversation on this show. So who are you buying the next 5 years? If you're watching the video or the live show, you can give me your feedback in the comment section below. But there's sort of this reset button feel for both of them. Obviously with Auburn, they just hired Brian Harsin. He's got a new staff in I'm about to talk about in just a second. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to this. I know you Auburn fans have. He's been making some moves. Now, there's one very popular talking point out there about Harsin amongst some of you that I don't agree with. So the start over is obviously in place at Auburn. Now, at LSU, you hadn't made a firing of the head coach announcement or anything like that, but you haven't done what Auburn did there, but you have kind of done the reset yourself because it's kind of like, you know, the exterior of the house is remaining, but there's a big interior remodeling project underway. Now, this is independent of any of the Title IX investigation. I don't know when that's going to be concluded. I don't know when we're going to have findings, what they're going to be. I don't know. So let's just assume for a second, even though we really can't in the real world, let's just assume for a second that's not going to derail the entire program, and let's just talk about football. LSU, you know, Ed Orgeron was disgusted with the product that they put on the field this year. So he goes and gets Jake Peetz, and he swallows his pride, and he calls Joe Brady, his old offensive coordinator. He says, "Joe, who can do what you could do?" And Joe says, I don't have a Joe Brady impression, but he says, "This guy." I think he was an assistant up at Carolina when Joe Brady was up there this year. And so basically they're just trying to find out who can do what they did a couple of years ago. They're trying to replicate that. I mean, I don't think that's the worst idea in the world. So LSU is going to have a lot of players return. I mean, a lot of them. They're going to have new pieces on the coaching staff, but the culture was the issue there this year. Okay, so that's where the big question mark is still to me is if we believe, and I do believe this, that culture is basically the fingerprint that a head coach puts on his program, and the culture was awful there this year, what has to change? I mean, in a normal circumstance, what would you say needs to change? Well, you would say you need a change in leadership. Well, that's not happening for the time being at LSU. But we've also seen LSU win a national title under Ed Orgeron. So it's not like we are guessing whether he's capable. He's capable of being the head coach for a national championship winning program. Director Colin is showing you footage straight from the eye, Josh, where we followed Ed Orgeron off the field a year ago. What was it, last night? I think a year ago yesterday. So, this is still fresh in everyone's mind. Some of the confetti is probably still in a pocket of one of my pairs of khakis somewhere. So that's the LSU side of things. What about Auburn? Auburn is sitting there with a brand new head coach. So this is a for sure reset button that's being hit in Lee County, Alabama. Here's the talking point that I was talking about that a lot of folks have attached to Brian Harsin that I don't really buy into. Since he has no connection to the South, he's going to be behind the 8 ball and probably won't succeed down here. Now, I cannot guarantee you he's going to succeed, but I'm telling you, I think one of the most overblown talking points in the coaching, hiring world is, do you have ties? Here's what you need to have a tie to: being able to install and establish an excellent culture. If you as a head coach can do that, here's what you can also do. You can hire. And here's what you can do when you hire. You can go get folks that have that aforementioned connection to the South. You know, names like Mike Bobo as your offensive coordinator, Derek Mason, fascinating, as your defensive coordinator. How about Will Friend as your O-line coach? How about Cadillac as your running back coach? Like, you can fill your staff with guys who know every single back road from Fort Payne to Mobile and everywhere in between. You can do that with your hires. It doesn't matter what kind of connection you have. Jeremy Pruitt knows the South like the back of his hand. How's Tennessee faring right now? I think way too much in hires in the SEC sometimes is put into this incestuous mentality of, if you haven't coached down here, there's no way we can ever entertain the idea of you coaching down here. No, I want a guy who's proven he can win. That's what I want. Because here's the thing about the formula for success. It works. If it works in Juneau, Alaska, it'll work in Jacksonville, Florida, and everywhere in between. I believe in geographic alliteration. And so Brian Harsin has put together a pretty impressive track record as a head coach. Now he's started to put together a coaching staff that knows the back rows, they know recruiting, they know the scene in the SEC, so everyone's familiar down here. Derek Mason in particular is one of, to me, the most interesting assistant coaching hires in all of college football. Like this time last year, I thought Kirk Soraka was this. He didn't pan out at Penn State for several reasons, and they've already fired him. This year's most interesting coordinator hire to me may very well be Derek Mason. Think about Derek Mason. So he was the head coach at Vandy. He gets fired. I'm a big believer in getting as many former head coaches as you possibly can on your coaching staff. Derek Mason, no one doubts his defensive credentials. What kind of recruiter is Derek Mason? Do you have any idea? I think maybe if you're unfamiliar with his history, you may say, oh, he's never landed many 4- or 5-star guys. Yeah, where's he been? Stanford and Vanderbilt? What stop on this Wikipedia resume of Derek Mason's would he have shown you what kind of recruiter he is? Well, this is the stop. Auburn University is the stop. Because now, no one's going to get caught up in a bunch of academic red tape trying to get a guy into school, okay? You can compete heads up with Georgia or Florida or Alabama, and you can get guys into school. You know what it could be? It could be that Brian Harsin found an A-level coach and an A-level recruiter. I don't know. I'm just telling you, I don't think we've scratched the surface of knowing what kind of recruiter Derek Mason could be. He's ultra relatable. Like, everyone who's ever been around him loves him. That's why universally, when Vanderbilt fired him, you know, a lot of people spoke out in support of Derek Mason because everyone loves him. Well, that'll probably bleed over to the players at Auburn too, and it could very well bleed over on the recruiting trail. So, you know, I think anyone's guess is as good as mine right now as to who you should buy into, because here's what we know. Well, here's what I think I know. I don't think recruiting will ever be an issue as long as Ed Orgeron's at LSU. I don't think culture will ever be an issue as long as Brian Harsin is at Auburn. If you could guarantee me that LSU gets the culture figured out or that Auburn gets the recruiting figured out, well, that'll go a long way in ultimately determining who gets that third seat and maybe second seat or eventually first seat at the table in the SEC West, and who's making another coaching change or another round of assistant coaching changes 2 or 3 years from now.